Let's talk now a little bit more in depth about how your camera actually meters a scene and how it determines how light or dark a picture should be. Keep in mind that your camera is basically just a little computer, and it doesn't know that your subject is in front of a very dark or very bright background. It doesn't know that your subject is fair-skinned or dark-skinned. It's basically just got a little computer algorithm going on that's trying to guess how bright or dark your scene should be, but in many cases, it's not going to make the best decision. And there are a few options that you can choose to make sure that the camera makes the most educated guess possible. If you want to understand just basically how a camera meters, think about 18% gray. That's the magic number that a camera tries to make every single scene. So if you take a picture of something that's totally black and there's nothing else around it and that's all the camera can see, it's going to overexpose that black subject and it's going to make it 18% gray. If you take a picture of something that's totally white, it's going to underexpose that subject and it's going to try to make it 18% gray. 18% gray is approximately the tone of Caucasian skin in black and white. It's also very common in grass and leaves and stuff like that. So the scientists who made the metering inside of these cameras, they went with some of the most common things that people take pictures of, and if you average them all together, in most cases they end up being around 18% gray. But as you can imagine, that really can confuse a camera. So now that you have a basic understanding of 18% gray, let's talk about the different metering modes that your camera can be set to. Perhaps the most automatic and common type of metering is matrix metering. And matrix metering is basically the camera looking at points all over the scene and just taking an average of them all and saying, I'm going to average all these points together and come up with around 18% gray. So if we have a very bright sky and we have a very dark foreground or subject, it's gonna pick something right in the middle of that. Most of these cameras also have something called center weighted metering, which basically means it's going to look at the center of the frame. Maybe there's a few points within the center of the frame, but it's going to give those more priority and it's going to average those center points and come up with, again, 18% gray. The final type of metering is single point metering, and basically that works kind of like the single point focusing. You can move around the dot inside the viewfinder and pick a very specific point that you want to focus on and you want to meter on. You'll want to use something like single point metering if you're taking a picture of a subject who might be in front of a really bright or dark background and you don't want the camera to consider that background at all. You just want to pick a point and say, meter only in this area. Let me quickly take you through each of the three cameras and show you where you can change your metering mode here. On the Nikon here, I just hit the I button up top. I can scroll over to metering, and then of course I have my three different metering modes here: matrix metering, center weighted metering, and spot metering. In the Canon camera here, I'm going to hit the Q button on the back, and then as you can see, I can click down here. If I hit the set button, it gives me actually four options here. I'll move over to this one. Evaluative metering, which is basically the exact same thing as matrix metering, it's just a different word. Here we have partial metering. I'm not exactly sure what the partial metering is. It probably considers the background a little bit, but doesn't give it as much credit as the center. Here we have spot metering, and then center weighted average or center weighted metering. Even our little Sony here has the exact same options. I'm going to hit the function button, and then you can see in the bottom left I have metering modes, and up top we have multi-point, which is matrix metering, center metering, and then of course spot metering. Now most of the time I usually keep my camera in matrix metering because of course you can see the picture on the back of the camera and you can fix it if it's wildly under or overexposed. But there are a few situations where I will put the camera into spot metering, and that's usually when my subject is much brighter or darker than the background. So let's go out into the field and I will show you an example of when I would use spot metering. So let me show you one extreme situation where you're going to want to use spot metering. First of all, I'm going to take a portrait of Chelsea standing in front of the sky, and to get the sky behind her, I'm going to sit on the ground and I'm going to shoot up at her. Now, the camera is going to be looking at the entire scene. It's going to see that really blown out sky and it's going to say, hey, I need to make that sky 18% gray. And it's going to darken the scene so much that I bet Chelsea is going to be pretty dark. Let's go ahead and give it a try. All right, so we'll take one shot here. I'm looking up at Chelsea. I'm in P mode, just kind of an automatic setting here. And as you can see, we do have a nice
sky. There's nice detail in the sky. You can actually tell it's a blue sky, but we have lost Chelsea completely. She's almost completely black here. And that's because we're in matrix metering mode and the camera's looking all over the scene and just trying to average 18% gray. So what I'm going to do is go into my settings here and I'm going to change my metering to spot metering. And then what I'm going to do is put that spot, which is the same spot as my focus point looking through the viewfinder here, right on her face, and I'm going to take the exact same picture. Boom. And as you can see, now we have a perfect exposure on Chelsea. We've lost our sky, but that's just what we have to deal with in this extreme lighting conditions. So guys, obviously this is a pretty extreme situation, but if you find yourself shooting outside, you're going to be shooting into sky a lot. And in weird situations like this, where the sky is really bright behind your dark subject or vice versa, your subject might be standing in the sun and the background's really, really dark, turning on spot metering is really gonna help your camera choose the right exposure if you're in one of these automatic or semi-automatic modes.
So hopefully that's helped you have a little bit more of an understanding of how your camera actually determines the exposure for each and every shot that it takes. Keep in mind that if you're shooting a range of different things, keeping your camera in matrix metering may be the easiest thing to do. But if you're in extremely different lighting conditions where your subject's dark and the background's pure white or anything like that, you may want to switch over to spot metering. But other than that, I usually keep it in matrix metering.